Prophet Muhammad created Islam. Prophet Muhammad, c. 570, a. June 632 and CE, was an Arab religious, social and political leader and the founder of Islam. According to Islamic doctrine, he was a prophet divinely inspired to preach and confirm the monotheistic teachings of Adam, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and other prophets. He is believed to be the seal of the prophets within Islam, with the Quran as well as his teachings and practices, forming the basis of Islamic religious belief. Muhammad was born in approximately 570 CE in Mecca. He was the son of Abdullah ibn Abd al-Muttalib and Amina bint Wahb. His father, Abdullah, died a few months before Muhammad's birth. His mother, Amina, died when he was 6, leaving Muhammad an orphan. He was raised under the care of his grandfather, Abd al-Muttalib, and paternal uncle, Abu Talib. In later years, he would periodically seclude himself in a mountain cave named Hira for several nights of prayer. When he was 40, circa 610 CE, Muhammad reported being visited by Gabriel in the cave and receiving his first revelation from God. In 613 CE, Muhammad started preaching these revelations publicly, proclaiming that God is one, that complete submission, Islam, to God is the right way of life, din, and that he was a prophet and messenger of God. Hello and welcome to today's video, where we're going to discuss the subject, why can Islam never unite in unity? But before we dive into that, make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever I upload a new video. And if you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. The question of unity among Islamic countries is complex and multifaceted. Here are some factors that might contribute to the challenges. 1. Diversity within the Muslim community. The Islamic world is not monolithic. There is significant diversity in terms of religious commitment, interpretations of faith, and acceptance of various sects and movements. Additionally, geopolitical factors also play a role. For instance, oil-rich states might have different priorities and challenges than those without much oil. 2. Negligence of religious teachings. Some argue that Muslims' negligence of the teachings of their religion, particularly those related to the social system as prescribed by Islam, contributes to the lack of unity. 3. External influences. There are also external factors at play, such as the influence of Western powers and other geopolitical dynamics. 4. Economic factors. Economic development and industrial progress also play a role in the unity or disunity among countries. It's important to note that these are just some of the many factors that can influence unity among Islamic countries. The situation is complex and varies greatly from one context to another. What is the history of Islam and its divisions? Islam is one of the 3 Abrahamic religions and is the second largest religion in the world after Christianity, with about 1.8 billion Muslims worldwide. The faith started in Mecca in modern-day Saudi Arabia during the time of the Prophet Muhammad. The major division in Islam occurred over a dispute about who should succeed the Prophet Muhammad as leader of the Islamic faith he introduced. This split between the 2 main sects within Islam, Sunni and Shia, go back some 400 years. Sunni Islam, the Sunni majority, named for Sunnah or tradition, won out and chose Muhammad's close friend Abu Bakr to become the first caliph or leader of the Islamic community. Today, about 85% of Muslims around the world are Sunni, Shia Islam. A smaller group believed only someone from Muhammad's family, namely his cousin and son-in-law Ali, should succeed him. This group became known as the followers of Ali, in Arabic the Shiite Ali, or simply Shia. Today, about 15% of Muslims around the world are Shia. Despite their differences, Sunni and Shia have lived alongside each other, in relative peace for most of history. But starting in the late 20th century, the schism deepened, exploding into violence in many parts of the Middle East, as extreme brands of Sunni and Shia Islam battle for both religious and political supremacy. There are also other Islamic sects and groups that date back to the early history of Islam. Between the 7th and 9th centuries CE, Kharijites, Sunnis, Shias, whereas others have arisen much more recently. Islamic neo-traditionalism, liberalism and progressivism, Islamic modernism, Salafism and Wahhabism, or even in the 20th century, Nation of Islam. Islam is the second largest religion in the world, with more than 1.5 billion followers, equivalent to nearly 20% of the world's population. However, contrary to other religions such as Buddhism or Christianity, although everywhere there are differences, in the middle they are still united and there is almost no conflict. Islam, however, exists as a terrible contradiction that has lasted for millennia and has no end in sight. So why are there these conflicts? Let's find out through today's video. This event marks the birth of Islam. This religion began to flourish until a turning point, occurred in 632 when Muhammad died, and problems began to arise as a sect leader died, and needed the next sect leader to inherit and promote sectarianism. This is when Islam began to branch out and conflict. Most believers believed that the position of Supreme Caliph should be reserved. As a believer and one of the Chelsea family's trusted assistants, these followers later became Sunni Muslims. Another group believed that Ali, the Prophet's cousin and son-in-law, who had been anointed by him, was worthy to be the Prophet's wife, who later became known as Shia or CI, shortened from CIA Islam, like Mount Huashan divided into swords and Qigong supporters won, when the title of Cardiff was awarded to him. However, this is when Ali finally became the fourth-generation caliph. After Abu Bakr's two successors were assassinated, imagine when two factions are at war, and the leader of one faction is assassinated. Who would be the first offender? But Ali was later assassinated with a poisoned sword at the Kufa church located in present-day Iraq. His two sons, Hassan and Hussein, became the leaders of Hussein and Hussein respectively. Many relatives were massacred in Karbala, Iraq in 680 by an army of a Sunni caliph. Deepening this division, Hussein's martyrdom became a central tenet for those who believed that Ali is the successor of the Prophet. And from now on, Shia and Sunni began to conflict and war was inevitable. But in contrast to swordplay, it was a compact battle divided between high and low, and that's it. The religion of the era is more complicated. This is a war that has lasted for more than a millennium on all fronts, from the battlefield to ideology over many generations and many changes. The late Mr. Sunni called himself a famous sect and called Mr. Up to Now. Sunni people account for more than 85% of the 1.5 billion Muslims around the world. They live mainly in Arab countries, Turkey, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Shia people make up the majority of the population in countries like Iran, Iraq, Bahrain. All Muslims in the world today recognize that Allah is the only supreme being and Muhammad is his messenger. They follow the 5 pillars of Islam, including the month of Islam, Ramadan fasting and sharing the Quran. The Sunni people rely heavily on following the Prophet's teachings, while the Shia people believe that their Ayatollah leaders are the embodiment of the supreme path on earth. This led to the Sunni people accusing the Shia people of worshipping false heretics, accusing the Sunni dogmatism of forming extremist sects, such as the Wath sect in the Middle East. The Sunni and Shia sects are represented by 2 countries, Saudi Arabia and Iran. These 2 men are like water and fire and both intend to be the leaders of Islam, unifying the ideology of one relationship, but as said, this war lasted 400 years. The 2 lines are still strong and weak, but basically neither side can destroy the other. The greatest strength of Islam is the spirit of martyrdom or martyrdom, which is something that can be eaten deep into their minds. Try to think that when everyone fights to death, no surrender, no negotiation, and of course no humility, the conflict will never be resolved unless one of them, both sides, were completely destroyed. Who is the traitor? As mentioned, Saudi Arabia and Iran are representatives of the 2 Islam lines, Sunni and Shia. And fighting is certain, but they do not directly carry troops and missiles at each other, but instead there are proxy wars similar to the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. The reason for this is because both sides were traitors before the 1970s. Both of these countries have quite good relations when both leaders, Iran's Kazashi and Saudi Arabia's Abdulaziz, are Western gods who admire a lot of oil and are considered the son of the United States in the U.S. Middle East, but in the 1970s, Firoz became increasingly a tyrant. He secularized Iran. The army was sent to suppress protesters at the temple and nomads from the settled lord. Left-wing and religious newspapers are closed and may be imprisoned. Massive protests end not in 7 bloods, but in a sea of blood. Secularization, in addition to bringing some rights benefiting women and filling the pockets of the king's rich people. Iran's entire society is immersed in poverty even though they have a lot of oil. In October 1971, the 2500th anniversary of the founding of the Persian Empire was held. Only foreign officials were allowed to attend the 3-day party, which cost $120 million equivalent to about $1.2 billion at today's prices. Meanwhile, that same year, tens of thousands of Iranians died of starvation, right in front of the party venue. Anger led to Iran's Tiger Revolution in 1979 under the leadership of the Iran leader of Rubella. The Iranian people rose up to overthrow King Zah's family under the leadership of Khomeini. Iran considered Saudi Arabia a traitor for joining hands with the United States, and especially the #1 enemy of the Muslims. That religion is Israel or the Jews. They have Iraq as an enemy against all. because they join hands with atheists. The Millennium's feud only temporarily subsided, before continuing to flare up like in the 7th century. The Islamic Revolution created an earthquake at that time with the whole Muslim world, especially with the Iraqi neighbors. In Iraq, 65% of the people are followers of Islam, but the government, led by Saddam Hussein, is the Sunni family, which is really ironic. In Saudi Arabia, 85% of the people follow the Sunni family and have a tradition of having their children be the leaders of the world. Muslims are also responsible for protecting 2 important churches, the Holy City of Mecca and the Holy City of Medina. They were worried that Iran would trigger a similar revolution in their country, so Saddam Hussein decided to act. Before Iraq launched the war on Iran, immediately Saudi Arabia threw money to support Iran. After 8 years, both sides suffered losses, but neither side could do anything. To the other side, more than 500,000 civilians on both sides were affected. The war ended, but it began after a proxy war between the parties, and these wars to compete for status and influence in the Middle East were also a systemic struggle. Things gradually became complicated when there was intervention from outside forces, the United States and Russia in 2003. The United States launched an attack on Iraq and overthrew the government of President Saddam Hussein. This country gradually fell into decline. After 20 years, this country is still a ruin, engulfed in fire and smoke in Libya and Lebanon. Morocco has Muslim forces supported by both sides to create pro-government or establish influence in lands controlled by pro-government forces. This makes the civil war continue without end. The bloodshed is continuous. Not only that, with the participation of the United States, they have turned Iraq into a paradise for terrorism, and the result is the birth of the state. Islam from Iraq, Syria, abbreviated as IS, and when everything was in turmoil in 2015, another big guy jumped into the game, Russia in Syria, and made things more divided than orange. Russia's intervention helped Mr. Ashesia's government win over the enemy's enemy. Their friend Iran and Russia joined hands to form a new power here. The contradiction became more and more terrible when both Arabs and Iran, accusing each other of joining hands with outsiders to betray their ideals. Until now, the conflict between the two sides has not been able to reconcile the Islamic conflict that has lasted for 1.5 millennia and is probably without sign. There is no sign that it will end, which is why Islam is always unstable. That's all the details for today's video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. If you like this video, please subscribe, share it with your friends, and give it a like. Bye, and have many nice days.